All right, good evening, everyone, and a very warm welcome, a very warm Singapore welcome, actually, which is quite contradictory because we're going through a little bit of a rainy season right now in Singapore. In fact, it's what I would call almost a Singapore winter. Well, you know why you're here. We are on today's episode live, coming to you virtually for the SFF Green Shoot series. Once again, my name is Gabriel, and I will be a host for today's sessions. This session is part one of a two-part special that we are hosting this week, and we're all going to be focused on CBDCs, right? Better known as central bank digital currencies. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, that's how serious we are about innovation in this particular vertical and this particular space. To the point that we even launched a retail CBDC challenge, because we not only want to involve what I would name the wider industry, but engage with you actively as well. All right, this challenge was actually announced on the 28th of June and submissions are still going on. Onto the session itself, we'll be actually covering a few key points that are very, very important for the challenge. First and foremost, obviously, is the genesis of the Global CBDC challenge, the gaps it seeks to address in the retail CBDC space, the motivation for even doing this in the first place, technological considerations, stations, and all of that. Last but not least, what are the expected challenges we could potentially face in doing something like this? All right, to lead today's session, we have our very own chief, Sopnendu Mohanty, who is the Chief FinTech Officer at MAS. He will be joined by Tommaso, who is the Deputy Division Chief of Monetary and Capital Markets Department at the IMF. We've got Brian, who's been with us quite a few times, Executive Director of Hyperledger. Last but not least, we've got Ahmed, for a Senior Financial Sector Specialist for the World Bank. Once again, the session will be live and online. There will be an online Q&A. If you look at the right side of the screen, there is post your questions in there. We will try our best to answer as many of the queries as we go on in the next 45 minutes. All right. And without further ado, I would like to hand it over to Sopnendu to lead the session right now. Over to you, Chief.
Hi, good evening and good morning to all of you out there, especially to my panelists who have taken a lot of pain to join from a very different time zone and willing to share their next 40 minutes with Asia. Especially Tommaso, you should be very happy with what happened this week. So congratulations. So with that happy note, I thought let's examine in the next 40 minutes why do we care for the whole retail CBDC. I'm not going to focus on the theory behind retail CBDC. There's a lot of materials out there. Let's focus next 40 minutes talking about this challenge and why it is so important for us to call it out and find a path to make retail CBDC, if there is any merit, to make it work. So the first question, which I will give it to three of you, but we'll start with first Brian, then Tommaso, and end with Ahmed, is why do you care? And especially Brian, given your own history behind the internet, now this is a completely different discussion, moving not only information, moving value. Why do you care? Why do you care retail CBDC? Why do you think this is an important topic for us to get indulged and talk about it?
Thank you, Sopnendu. It's great to be here, and thanks for the introduction. I'm Brian Behlendorf, Executive Director of Hyperledger. Hyperledger is an open source project that's been around for about 5 years now, focused on delivery of enterprise blockchain technologies and platforms. And the topic of both retail and wholesale central bank digital currencies has been a very hot one in our community. I think we are now 12 years past the Satoshi Nakamoto's Bitcoin paper, and there's a lot to criticize and be concerned about in the cryptocurrency world, of course. But one of the things that I believe it showed was that people want a different approach to money. they want a different relationship to the stores of value, to the ability to exchange value across borders, and in unregulated markets and unregulated technologies that run smack up against all the kinds of concerns we have about not just know your customer laws and anti-money laundering, but also privacy. There is no privacy on the Bitcoin blockchain. There's also a tremendous amount, not just of volatility, but concern about the role that those kinds of technologies play in crime and in malware and other sorts of rather dangerous environments. But people want the kind of liquidity that comes from these digital tokens, and they want the ability to do business with a much wider array of parties than they typically do, and a much more streamlined engagement with the financial sector than they tend to have today through ordinary systems. Central banks are obviously asking, is this something that is appropriate for us to be involved in? Because there's a lot of concerns if you make money too liquid, if you bring down too many of the barriers, do you not only enable some of the illegal activities, but do you also create instability or the potential for a bug in some code somewhere to bring the whole thing down, right? Central banks and currencies are pillars of society here. So the only way to really get to a system that we all can trust is the same way we got to an internet that we all can trust, which is through working together on shared technologies. And shared technologies, not just in the form of standards that we all can inspect, that we all can understand, but also through shared technology development, looking at the source code and uplifting all the different organizations that want to work together to tie into a common network. The cryptocurrency world has long been driven by open source code. That has been one reason why it's scaled so quickly and achieved so much. And this is exactly what we see the central banks looking at and asking about as well. Can we be working together to build a multipolar world in the exchange of value across between central banks and across borders?
The user mute. Okay. Brian talks about trust and why he feels strongly that this particular instrument can address the last unfinished agenda of network connectivity, moving value along with moving information and ownership. I thought I'll go to Tommaso, but given they just won the World Cup, Euro Cup, I will keep him the last. But I'll go to Ahmed. Is that from World Bank's perspective, there's something has to do with the instrument itself. So why do you care for retail CBDC if you think as a financial instrument?
Thanks. I think it's a very interesting time right now. The interest in issuing CBDC is, I have to say, it's coming from most of the central banks and monetary authorities in the world. And with the technology that have evolved in the last maybe decade, coming from the DLT technology, the blockchain, I think those technologies are providing golden opportunities for rethinking how the financial system is working. So the point right now is it's not about introducing a new instrument like the cards, the bank cards, payment cards, or e-money, or the traditional way of performing, exchanging value. But here it's there is a sort of rethinking with the policymakers of many of the concepts that we have used in the past, and I think this is a great time. If you are having a new, completely a new model, completely new payment instrument, new currency, then it's a great time to rethink of some of the principles. So let me give an example about this. Traditionally, when you go to a supermarket and use your card to buy from the supermarket, the transaction that takes place using your card and the point of sale at the merchant typically transfers some of your personal information to the merchant. This is normal, and we used to do this for the last 40, 50, 60 years now, and no one complains. But now it looks like it's time to rethink is this legitimate? Do we need to do this? And comparing, for example, to something like cash, when you go to a new supermarket, the merchant doesn't know you, then you just bring out cash, pay the price for the goods and leave, and actually the merchant never knows who you were. The point here is that with CBDC, the introduction of CBDC, there are some rethinking of whether we should transfer the personal information to the merchant upon making a transaction. Do we need to do so? Actually, there is a debate or a trade-off here. One point is related to privacy. If we need to secure the privacy of the people, at the same time, we are there is another side of the coin, which is the illicit finance. Are we sure that this transaction is legitimate? Are we sure that there is no money laundering or financing terrorism to this? So because of this nature of trade-offs, the CBDC actually is giving new opportunities for people to rethink of how things should be done. So lot of by the way, some solutions have came out for such issue. For example, for the very simple transaction between a person and a merchant, some people say that okay, if the transaction is beyond certain limit, then it should be anonymous. So no information should be transferred. Others say that, okay, we can start now to separate the financial information from the personal information. So if I want to make a transaction with the merchant, then the merchant is keen to know maybe the financial information like the bank account, the value, but he's not keen to know the personal information, who am I, or I mean, or where I live. At the same time, so this is another debate. A third solution, or a third proposal that we're coming out for this is that okay, we can put all the personal information in a specific entity that would be in charge of the AML CFT issues, and then we will hide those information till we have a suspicious transaction, then look at this. This example actually gives you how much there is a rethinking of a lot of the, I have to say, what we could see as a typical way of doing a transaction. So the CBDC in reality is providing or giving a huge opportunity to do things in a different way, to do things in a way that you still think of the principle. You can actually bring some of the past issues and then try to find a solution for such a trade-off or such a debate about some of the basic principles. Thank you.
So Ahmed, that's a good point. That one of the things you would like to see in this particular CBDC is to examine some of the challenges we have with existing instruments when it comes to payment and transfer of value. Tommaso, given you are from IMF and you would have seen in the public space, in the academics, there's so much of struggle between central banks community to debate in their head. We have quite a well-run, well-tested construct today in different countries. Why do we have to go and indulge in retail CBDC, and why this has become such a seductive and romantic narrative for all of the enthusiastic around the world, and now it has started contaminated the central banks to even think about it? So your view, why do you care?
Thank you so much. It's really a pleasure to be here. I've been a long-time fan of Sopnendu and his work and that of his team, and now all the more so because I think that this hackathon shows tremendous foresightedness and tremendous energy and dedication to the international community. So we're very happy to be a partner at the IMF, and we certainly care about CBDC because many of our members care about CBDC. Let me tell you why they care. It's interesting to see that the diversity of views actually around the world. Some are interested in CBDC simply to reduce the costs of cash management. These are countries that typically have multiple islands or very large territories over which it's difficult and costly to transfer cash. Others are interested in CBDC for efficiency, safety, and resilience reasons. So these are countries that see their payment systems being increasingly dominated by private sector firms that are increasingly large and potentially foreign. These are central banks that want to introduce an alternative, a state-backed alternative to discipline the markets, to allow for resilience, and to serve the changing needs of end users. There are also some central banks that are interested in financial inclusion. CBDC is, of course, not a sufficient condition, but it can help. It can help decrease the access costs to a payment instrument, and it can help by bringing a more trustworthy payment instrument to the public. And it can help if it's accompanied by complementary policies, such as the development of national digital identities in order to onboard users to CBDC. Other countries are simply interested in CBDC for productivity reasons. They see CBDC as an opportunity, as a platform on which the private sector can then build further solutions and thus increase the productivity, lower the cost of doing business on their territory. Some countries are interested in CBDC for cross-border integration. They don't want to be left out, and they want to be able to leverage some of the benefits of CBDC to facilitate cross-border payments. We can speak about that later. I think it's a very interesting and involved topic on which participants to this hackathon can ideally provide a lot of value. We have a lot of countries thus interested in CBDC. We have a lot of countries asking for help in this space because of limited domestic capacity, but wanting to explore, wanting to get involved. And I think this hackathon will contribute to that. It's one extra brick in this building that central banks are hoping to construct for the benefits of end users and to meet some of these policy objectives that we just discussed. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Brian. Very articulate. Thank you, Tommaso. Very articulate on the way you have put this. Why do you care? But I couldn't. Before I go to my next question, I couldn't resist taking a few questions from the chat window, which is just popping up with a lot of questions. What really caught my sight is this question: the coexistence of CBDC, retail CBDC, with commercial banks. I think that's been a big debate. And the second question, and this is for Brian to pick, if you can respond, how does the retail CBDC challenge the existing cryptocurrencies? So the cryptocurrency question to Brian, and Tommaso, if you can pick up the coexistence of retail CBDC with existing commercial banks' role, credit role, and the intermediate role they play. Just quickly reflect on that. Let's not spend a lot of time because I have a couple of questions to go. Just quick response. Brian, go with the crypto question.
Well, the hackathon, I think, is really an important tool to be able to address some really key challenges in being able to roll these technologies out. These are challenges that in some ways the cryptocurrency world has addressed in a way that completely blows over issues like privacy and the appropriate role for KYC and AML, that kind of thing. But we don't have the luxury of being able to blow past when it comes to retail or wholesale CBDCs. So I think it's really important, though, that we try to use the same tools that community has used in terms of working together, open source software, public vetting, public visibility, and adoption of common technologies, because that has been key to the adoption and growth in that space. And there's nothing about that approach that is difficult, irreconcilable with the needs and the challenges that have been identified as the core challenges in the hackathon. So really excited to see that take off.
So Brian, do you think that if retail CBDC succeeds, it will have its impact on the cryptocurrencies?
Well, I think it should happen whether or not it does, right? The internet, there are a lot of questions in the early days of the internet as to, if we brought businesses onto the internet, would that change the culture? Would that change the value that people got from connecting in a more nonprofit kind of setting or a more academic kind of setting? It certainly did change the internet, but it changed that and it changed society for the better. If we want to unlock the potential for new kinds of financial instruments or for giving people more direct access to their value and the ability to move that value as they need, we have to be able to figure out how to do this with the kinds of financial instruments and currencies that people are familiar with and are at the root of how they pay their rent, how they pay their tax bill, how they exist in society. And so I think it'll add to the space and not necessarily take anything away from the cryptocurrency world. And I think it'll just help fill in a really rich help address a very complex set of needs.
Brian, you just made a little statement may change the price of cryptocurrency tonight. Tommaso, conflict with the commercial bank.
Yeah, thanks. That's a very important question because it's the number one concern that central banks have when they think about CBDC, disintermediating the banking sector. And that can happen in two ways. During a crisis where you have a large shift away from deposits to CBDC, a run on the banks, in other words. And it can happen in normal times where you have a share of deposits that get withdrawn and invested in CBDC for in the steady state. And of course, central banks know how to deal with runs on banks. There's deposit insurance. The idea is here to provide liquidity that the end users are using. And in fact, CBDC may even help in providing the liquidity. So we're less concerned about the run in crisis times. We should think more about disintermediation in normal times. But again, there are reasons not to be too concerned to the extent that, number one, the banks can fight back. If there is CBDC as an alternate asset to hold, banks can provide themselves better payment services or can remunerate deposits at a higher rate. In fact, some models even suggest that if they were to do so, you might see a shift away from illiquid assets towards bank deposits. And in the end, bank deposits might even increase. But that's very model dependent. If there were to be a large movement out of bank deposits into the CBDC, there are tools that the central banks can resort to. And that is establishing quantity limits on how much CBDC end users can hold, or price incentives so that above a certain level of CBDC, you would start to pay increasingly high fees. And thus, that would be a mechanism to dissuade large movements away from bank deposits. Why do we care about disintermediating the banks? Not because we want to necessarily protect the income and profits of banks per se, but because banks play an important role in society in intermediating savings to investments and do so in a relatively efficient manner. So we do want to preserve that ability to provide credit to the economy. So again, very briefly, these are legitimate concerns. They're important, but they are policy tools to respond to this, and banks themselves will respond to the introduction of CBDC.
Good point. In fact, I got a lot of calls when we announced this hackathon. A lot of commercial banks called us and asked me, should they participate? I'm pretty sure they're thinking something in this space to use retail CBDC in their business model. So I'm quite optimistic we will find a space to coexist between commercial bank and retail CBDC. Now, switching gear, let's go deep into the hackathon event itself. When we started the hackathon, we announced 12 challenges and we broke down into 3 groups: instrumentation, and distribution and infrastructure. And what I'm going to do now, I will take the instrument part first and ask this question to Ahmed. But Ahmed, I'm also going to add some questions which I saw in the chat group. People are asking that why can't we just upgrade our existing payment system, make it better? Why do we care for retail CBDC? That's something you must take in as you answer the question around the instrument itself? Is there an opportunity to build new functionalities, inclusivity, security, more accessible? How to make it, how to resolve disputes, things around a payment instrument? Please just reflect on the whole instrument part, along with the questions out there on why can't you just make existing payment system better? Well, I have an answer, but I'm a moderator today. So let you answer that question.
Let me first go to your first question about the hackathon and the different policy question that you are raising in the hackathon, and then let's move to this at the end. I think the hackathon and the problem statements are very interesting because it opens a number of debates that are actual and are real. Right now, we have a lot of central banks are investigating in the CBDC arena, and they are trying to find some real solutions. And the hackathon actually is asking the right questions that central banks are asking. So and you are requesting answers, requesting solutions from the competitors, and that's exactly what other central banks are waiting for. So, for example, for the problem statement number one around the new functionalities versus the inclusivity, it's a real problem right now. If you are looking at a lot of developing countries, they have. In reality, they have lack of access to smartphones, and with the concept that the CBDC would operate on possibly on a blockchain environment or a wallet that would access a blockchain in the background, then it would need some sort of private keys to access tokens, and based on this, the typical maybe a wallet will be operated on a smartphone, but smartphones are not, I have to say, dominant in a lot of countries. So in many countries, people don't have smartphones. They are either can have access to cards or maybe feature phones. The problem here is that the CBDC would come as a legal tender, meaning that it is acceptable in the whole country. If it were developed or there was an initiative in one country, then typically a CBDC should be accepted and should be accessed by everyone. So the challenge here is that how you develop a CBDC wallet on a card or a feature phone. That's real question mark, by the way, because if you are using, for example, a card, you need to use the existing card structure, existing card rails, existing switches in order to pass transactions that in the background are accessing tokens and are using some sort of private keys. So how can you enable the CBDC to be accessed through cards? This is one of the big questions, or using as well feature phones. By the way, M-Pesa, for example, the whole ecosystem is operating on feature phones. So, but the whole ecosystem is not based on public key, private keys, not based on blockchain background, is not based on DLT. So, but how can you make such a shift? Noting, for example, if you are going to use cards, that typically a card is a credit pool, is using a credit pool where the transaction starts from the point of sale terminal or the ATM terminal, which is the payee side, not the payer side. while the typical CBDC transaction on a wallet is a credit push, where the transaction starts from the payer, not from the payee. So how can you use the existing rails, existing infrastructure to enable such a shift in the payments? That's a good exercise for the competitors here. By the way, I have to say that a company like MasterCard are working with the Central Bank of Bahamas to enable such sort of transactions. Visa are working with other central banks within their CBDC initiatives. But whatever you will develop here will benefit a lot of other domestic card schemes. You have hundreds of domestic card schemes in the world, and those are not yet working with any of the I have to say CBDC initiatives also. So this is a real important question and real and the question that the market is waiting for answers to.
Sure.
The other statement I can select, for example, problem statement number 3. It's about the availability versus risk of disputes, and this is again a very important question. If you are looking at a lot of developing countries, you can find that there are cuts or intermittent cuts in electricity, in mobile network. So at this time, if the transaction is always online, then the people, if there is a cut in the internet, the people will not be able to make transactions. They will not be able to pay, for example, for a merchant to buy food. And here, the CBDC will not gain any confidence in the market. So the offline transaction, how to do an offline transaction, how to do a transaction where there is no internet, there is no electricity, that's cool. That's actually even in the paper produced by the BIS and 7 of the central banks, they mentioned that the offline transactions are indispensable in the CBDC systems. That's real requirements. The point here is that how to look at the how to look from technology providing provisioning point of view on enabling such an offline transaction. At the same time, how not to dispute the system, how not to abuse the system, how not to ensure that there wouldn't be a sort of hacker that would use such offline transactions to gain money while the users are offline and then abuse them. That's a real question mark. And by the way, some technology providers are working on this, and some, by the way, some already provided some solution. So we have a number of questions here that are actually real questions, that are a real problem that are facing central banks and the technology providers while they are developing their CBDC solutions. The problem statement number 4 is not less important, the recoverability versus anonymity. Now, if you are developing, for example, if I'm a user for the Bitcoin, I'm anonymous. If for example, if I lost my mobile where I have my private keys, or the computer was, damaged or whatever, then I will lose my access to my money, and that's it. I have no recoverability. But in money, when it comes to central bank money, when it comes to the public money, in this case, the central bank cannot allow such thing to happen. They have to provide some sort of recoverability for the users, because otherwise the people will lose trust in the whole system. Not here that most of the users may be financially illiterate, may be even illiterate. So how to do this with simple approach, how to do this with simplicity, with a way that any user can do. I mean, that's the key here. You are working with all the citizens of a country. You are working with the all the population, regardless of their level of literacy, regardless of level of awareness of the financial aspects or security aspects. That's a real challenge when it comes to how to deal with anonymity here versus recoverability. So I think the green shot is bringing some very good questions, some very reasonable questions and looking or trying to find solutions for something that is actual, that is on the ground, that is something, I mean, everyone is looking for at this time. Thank you. On your question, I have to say it's a very challenging issue. From payments perspective, most of the aspects that exist in the CBDC exist in other alternative payment systems, including fast payment systems, including, for example, even programmability in CBDC. You have APIs in fast payments and other rails. So the issue here is that it's a policy choice for the country. Some countries would prefer to use their own to upgrade their own infrastructure, payments infrastructure. Others would go to the CBDC. By the way, even if any country selected a CBDC, this doesn't mean that it will kill all the other systems. The other systems will exist. The other payment instruments will exist. The cash will exist. It's something like adding a new road between two cities. So you can still have 2, 3, 4, 5 roads between two cities, and all of them would be each driver would have preference to some roads because it fits his own requirements. So the issue here is that other systems would exist with CBDC, at least for a long time, by the way. So, but at a point of time, there would be maybe after 30 years, 40 years, I have no idea, there would be a point of decision. If one system decayed and the usage, went down, then maybe the authorities would put this off and continue only with specific systems. But I wouldn't say that other systems will die now, or the opportunities for the upgrade using other payment systems is less strong than CBDC.
Thank you, Ahmed. I think it's a very good way to articulate that whole discussion around instrumentation of this whole new retail CBDC. I think that good time to switch to Tommaso. Assuming we have this mission impossible achieved in building that instrument, retail CBDC, with all the attributes we just discussed, I think the distribution becomes a critical enabler because, from data protection, from KYC, from frictionless transfer, we have put together four specific challenge questions. Your take on that?
Thanks very much. The challenge questions are right on. They're also very broad. So I'm going to pick a few to discuss.
Sure.
The first is the ability to use CBDC for cross-border payments while at the same time not undermining countries' ability to implement capital flow management measures. As you know, most IMF member countries implement some form of capital flow management measures. This is an essential part of the challenge, and I would be very interested to see with the solutions that companies come up with. One possibility is, of course, to allow the authorities of the recipient country to set certain parameters in the wallets that their citizens use to access a foreign CBDC, so as to implement at least a certain range of capital flow management measures, including limits on foreign currency holdings or spending, etc. There are other ways to do this, though, and it could be through checking the identities of holders and then automatically implementing certain restrictions on the holding or the transfer of CBDC. That's very, very interesting. The concern of countries is, of course, that capital flow management measures will be circumvented by digital forms of money. Here, there's an opportunity to show that these measures can be made more efficient and more targeted. So I'd be very interested to see the solutions that come up. The other important, very important question in this block of the challenge is on interoperability. What does interoperability mean? At some level, it's as simple as Sopnendu is in Singapore, I'm in Switzerland right now. Can Sopnendu send me money through CBDC? There are different ways of doing this. One way is, of course, for me to hold Sopnendu's CBDC token in my wallet here in Switzerland. That would be interoperability. But it brings up a lot of questions and a lot of barriers, many of which are not technological. I would have to be able to hold the CBDC of Sopnendu, I would have to be KYC'd most likely. I would have to, the transfer of the token, the onward transfer of the token would have to be monitored for AML-CFT compliance. There are regulatory hurdles that I hope participants of this challenge will look into and will offer solutions to. Another way to transfer coins from Singapore to Switzerland is, of course, for Sopnendu to go to an intermediary that has access, wallet access to both jurisdictions, and will take the Singaporean token and issue a Swiss token to my wallet. How exactly does that work? On what platform? Who can participate in that? And what are the technological and regulatory barriers that need to be overcome? Again, a really interesting and important part of the challenge. The third question that I'd like to dwell on very briefly, and this will be the last, is the public-private partnerships. There are different ways in which the private sector can participate. And I'd be very interested to see possible solutions. I see three buckets. The first is for the private sector to simply act as a distributor. So the central bank issues CBDC, the private sector distributes it. You want to get CBDC, you go to a bank or whatever private sector provider, and you'll be able to exchange bank deposits for CBDC. Very simple. The next level of involvement of the private sector is for the private sector to actually incorporate CBDC in some existing applications, financial or even social applications. Imagine being able to pay a friend on your favorite messaging app. That would simply need, the messaging app will need to talk to the wallet, which would need to talk to the CBDC in order for that to happen in the background. As a user, I don't want to know about it. But of course, the private sector here has developed this functionality, this layer, not functionality, this layer that is added on top of the CBDC to make it more usable. The third level is, of course, the most involved level of involvement. And there, the private sector would actually be building an app that would be added to the CBDC to extend its functionality. So think of, this is maybe science fiction, or it will seem like science fiction to some of you, but let's be forward-looking and imagine in an app store for CBDC, where you might be able to download apps that are developed by the private sector and vetted by the central bank for quality and stability, of course. And those apps would allow you to enhance the functionality of CBDC. Those three different types of private sector involvement, I think, are very interesting to look into. I hope that participants will offer solutions that pertain to each of these buckets so that central banks can then think about whether they're comfortable with these different levels of private sector involvement. What are the opportunities and what are the risks? So again, thank you for participating in this hackathon, and I really look forward to seeing the solutions that you come up with.
You know, Tommaso, I'm going to play this clip and send to all the banks so that they get they should not get stressed anymore. They see a space for themselves. Very well said. Now, Brian, a lot of questions on that Q&A, questions around blockchain, questions around infrastructure, which will power this RCBDC. So your hands are full in terms of responding that those set of questions. But given we don't have much time, if you can take those blockchain, is blockchain required or not required? All the infrastructure offline transactions, and takes the questions we have on the challenge, try to put together a frame, your take on the infrastructure challenges for this hackathon.
Right. Well, it's a really important question. Is this the tail wagging the dog in terms of, this excitement around a technology, blockchain technology? Is that really, should it be driving this conversation about CBDCs? And certainly we've seen examples, for example, the Chinese central bank digital currency, which does not use blockchain technology, does not use distributed ledger technology, but is instead a very centralized system. And ask, is that something we want in other places or we need? I think much of the rest of the world runs very differently than the Chinese economy. And I think we are really keen to figure out how do we facilitate a multipolar world, and blockchain technology, distributed ledger technology is very aligned with that worldview. And I want to be clear for the audience, when we talk about blockchain technology here, we don't mean proof of work, which in the cryptocurrency world is what drives that tremendous amount of energy consumption and a lot of really negative environmental impacts that are, of course, a downstream impact of that. There are ways to use blockchain technology that do not have those do not use that algorithm, do not use that approach to distributed consensus, that instead work on very well-known algorithms. And that's in fact the nature of a lot of the Hyperledger technologies. All of them, in fact, operate without proof of work running, and are really designed to build these multi-party networks, these multi-party systems, which align very nicely with the role that central banks play in relation to retail banks out there in the world. I want to echo Tommaso's kind of observation that the interoperability challenge is perhaps the most important part of this. I think what helped the internet grow, what helped email grow to become the red blood cell of the internet, what helped the web grow was the avoidance of this kind of captured portal kind of mentality. I can use a different email system from Tommaso, from Sopnendu, from everybody, and yet I can still send you email. Right? I've got to be able to still exchange tokens of value, exchange a retail CBDC, even with people who are using a different wallet, even with people who are on a different operating system. It cannot work like the kind of trapped payment systems that we have today for consumers, whether it's PayPal or Venmo or those kinds of closed systems. Those should be thought of as like the AOL and the Prodigies. For anyone who is older than of a certain age remembers those systems before they got onto the internet. And in particular, we've got to figure out how to support a wallet that can hold multiple currencies, that can be backed by the exchanges and by other systems for being able to move these tokens around, but be built on standards so that we can have a healthy commercial ecosystem, competitive ecosystem that doesn't put the consumers at risk of losing their value or having a lot of baggage and overhead when they try to exercise a right to use different tools in different places. So I think the challenges are spot on in the Global CBDC challenge in helping us figure out how to get to a much better place than we otherwise would.
Well, thank you, Brian. Before I get to the last question, because you have 5 minutes left, let me assure to all the 400 plus people watching this show now that don't worry that you have to solve everything. If you solve pieces of those challenge, do submit your proposal, because ultimately we're looking for collaboration from different solutions for different issues and challenges, and the ultimate solution will be a collage of all these ideas getting solved and coming together. We do not expect a single solution to solve everything. If somebody can do it, most welcome. You will get the Euro Cup final championship award. But don't worry, solve a piece of that and submit your proposal. So last question for 3 of you. Let's assume that we had a very successful event. We find very good solutions. I really don't believe in number 3, number 2, number 1. I believe that whoever applies and they actually demonstrate a good solution are up for a commercial opportunity or solving a real need post-hackathon. Starting with Ahmed, what you will do with these people? Are you going to talk to them, reach out to them? If yes, what you have in your mind from the list of participants who will solve these challenges?
Thanks, Sopnendu. Actually, we are working with a number of central banks on designing their CBD systems, and actually those solutions would help us a lot in so we can either put them directly with the commercial banks, we can promote them with the central banks. We can promote the work. Even we can put the work in our publications. If we do a lot of publications about CBDC and other issues. So if we found real solutions to existing problems, then typically we refer to it. We refer to them. So I think we would be in contact with them, and we would benefit from the work that they are doing.
Thank you. Tommaso, a quick thought on the people who will submit their solutions, how you think you can help them?
Thank you. Yes, we're especially interested in understanding what is possible. And we have worked very closly with country authorities around the world. We would never suggest to them to use company A as opposed to company B. That's not what we're in the business of doing, but we are in the business of bringing new ideas to countries, frameworks to help countries navigate these policy trade-offs, and knowing what is possible will make our advice a lot more valuable. And then, of course, it's up to the country authorities to look for the specific companies who might most help them in their endeavors. So we are here to learn about what is possible to complement our policy advice.
Thank you. Brian, you have the heavy lifting. You have a foundation, you have all the infrastructure. They may look up to you to provide them tools to write the solution. So you may reflect quickly on that. We have a couple of minutes to go.
Well, what's really important for folks to understand is that as an open source community, we don't write the code. We are the participants in the community write the code, and by that I don't just mean volunteers. I mean companies, small and large, who are working together on common technologies, on common platforms, on common open source projects. Whether it's the things like Hyperledger Bezu, Hyperledger Fabric, Hyperledger Roja, or it's the technologies that now are building on top of those platforms. And no one company is going to solve this entirely. No one company is going to put all the pieces in one box and commercially license that and say, here's everything soup to nuts for an entire central bank digital currency system. It's only going to arrive by folks working together on layers that actually build on top of those blockchain infrastructure pieces. And so one of the biggest risks in any hackathon like this is that people come up with a great idea, they push out code, they win an award, and then they all go back to their other jobs, or they all forget about what they built. They built because they built it in a rush. It wasn't something that's going to turn into something new. But open source software as an outcome of this hackathon is really interesting. The idea that these projects might serve as seeds for continual efforts after the competition is done. And so we are very eager to work with those teams to not only help them use the technologies underneath, but also think about the life for the code that they're writing afterward, and whether it's something they give away or something they build a commercial business on top of. We're here to help them do that.
Thank you, Brian. You are right on the time. But before we give it to Gab, let me tell all the participants that we are looking for whatever solutions you have, and we have put a sandbox in the API Exchange platform. Any country from anywhere in this world can participate. We have put an infrastructure on the cloud called API Exchange. Please do use it to solve your problem. We have got participants, support from different technology companies who are giving APIs and other tools to write your software. Please do use them. With that optimism, I want to thank again to all my panelists. I'll hand over to Gab to close the session.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Sop. Thank you, fellow panelists. Most importantly, thank you all the viewers and everybody who've taken your time out, wherever you are in the world, whether you're here in Singapore or across the world. Thank you again, right, for spending the time with us. I think one thing we can really take away from this is that this challenge is not just simply a hackathon competition or anything like that. I think this is a challenge looking for collaboration and partnerships. This is what we're really driving. And obviously, if you want to find out more about the CBDC challenge, details are in the Zoom chat box. Can have a look at it. Post virtual event, post session, we'll also be sending out a thank you email with the following details and everything. Just to round things up, one very quick announcement. Don't forget, this is a CBDC Green Shoots Week. Means we'll be back again. We'll be back this time on Thursday for part 2, and we'll actually be taking a slightly different look at CBDCs. We'll actually be having a conversation with the industry about the possibilities and opportunities about decentralizing CBDCs. Possible, not possible, fundamentals, everything. We're just going to throw it all in. So we're going to see you Thursday, 4 p.m. Singapore time. Once again, details will also be available to you on email, or simply just follow us on our social media handles on LinkedIn, on Twitter, Facebook. All the information is there. Just have to search for SG FinTech Fest and you'll find us. Once again, everyone, good night, stay safe, and bye-bye.